The crystal glass slipped from the billionaire's hand and shattered across the polished restaurant floor just as the young waiter calmly stepped forward. Every guest turned their heads. The room fell silent. A few moments earlier, the wealthy businessman had mocked the waiter in front of dozens of people, laughing so loudly that others joined in. But instead of lowering his eyes in shame, the single father stood taller than ever before, looked directly into the billionaire's eyes, and with quiet courage that echoed through the dining room, said, "Mock me again, I dare you." No one expected what happened next. The silence became heavier than the sound of the broken glass, and for the first time in years, the richest man in the room had absolutely nothing to say. If you believe kindness is stronger than pride, forgiveness is more powerful than revenge, hope can change lives, and everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing family that believes every act of compassion matters. The city of Brookhaven woke early every morning beneath bright blue skies and warm sunshine. Office workers hurried through clean streets, delivery trucks rolled past busy intersections, and cafes welcomed customers before the morning rush. Among them stood one of the city's finest restaurants, a place famous for serving politicians, celebrities, athletes, and billionaires. Every table sparkled. Every plate looked like a masterpiece. Behind the polished dining room, however, worked a man whose greatest achievement had nothing to do with expensive food. His name was Colton Mercer, a 34-year-old single father who had spent the last 7 years raising his daughter alone. Life had changed forever after his wife passed away following a sudden illness that no doctor had detected early enough. The loss nearly destroyed him. Friends slowly disappeared. Bills continued arriving. Grief stayed longer than anyone expected. But every morning when little Nora smiled at him before school, Colton found another reason to keep going. He worked double shifts as a waiter, often beginning before sunrise and finishing before evening so he could always be home for dinner with his daughter. Money was tight, but love filled their tiny apartment. They celebrated birthdays with homemade cakes, watched old movies on weekends, planted flowers on their small balcony, and laughed at silly jokes that no one else would understand. Nora never complained about what they lacked because her father had taught her that true wealth was measured by love, honesty, and kindness. Across town lived Roland Hawthorne, one of the country's youngest self-made billionaires. Newspapers praised his business empire. Financial magazines admired his aggressive investments. Television hosts admired his confidence. Yet those who worked for him knew another side. Roland believed money gave him permission to look down on others. Employees feared disappointing him. Waiters avoided serving his table. Drivers whispered stories about impossible demands. Success had built his fortune, but arrogance had built the lonely walls around his heart. One bright Saturday afternoon Roland arrived at the restaurant with several wealthy investors hoping to finalize another enormous business acquisition. Every seat near the windows was occupied by executives discussing contracts while families enjoyed peaceful lunches nearby. The restaurant manager quietly asked Colton to serve the billionaire's table because he remained calm even under pressure. Colton smiled politely as he greeted the guests and carefully took their orders. Roland barely acknowledged him. Throughout the meal he criticized every small detail. One glass contained too much ice. A steak arrived 1 minute later than expected. A napkin had a tiny wrinkle. Each complaint grew louder than the last. His companions laughed because they wanted Roland's approval. Colton never argued. He apologized respectfully and corrected every request. Years of hardship had taught him that dignity often speaks loudest through patience. During the main course Roland noticed the worn stitching on Colton's shoes as the waiter placed another plate onto the table. A cruel smile appeared across his face. Loud enough for nearly everyone nearby to hear, Roland joked that perhaps the restaurant paid its staff in leftovers instead of wages. Laughter spread around the table. Colton forced himself to remain calm. Then Roland looked directly at him and continued mocking his appearance, suggesting that someone dressed so poorly could never understand success. A few nearby diners lowered their eyes in embarrassment. Parents quietly distracted their children. Even several investors shifted uncomfortably. Colton thought about staying silent. Then he remembered Nora asking him that morning why some people hurt others just because they could. He remembered answering that courage did not always mean fighting. Sometimes courage meant standing up without becoming cruel yourself. He slowly placed the serving tray beside the table. He looked calmly at Roland. His voice remained steady. "Mock me again, I dare you." No shouting. No threats. Only honesty. The restaurant became completely silent. Roland expected fear. Instead he saw confidence built from years of surviving pain far greater than insults. Colton explained quietly that expensive watches could never measure character and luxury cars could never transport a person away from their own pride. He admitted he worked long hours. Yes, his shoes were old. Yes, he lived in a small apartment. Yes, he often skipped buying new clothes so his daughter could attend music lessons she loved. Every sacrifice he made carried a purpose greater than himself. People throughout the restaurant listened without speaking. Roland tried laughing again, but this time no one joined him. The investors who had laughed only moments earlier suddenly seemed deeply uncomfortable. An elderly woman dining nearby quietly wiped tears from her eyes. One father squeezed his son's shoulder a little tighter. The restaurant manager prepared to intervene, but Colton respectfully apologized for interrupting the guests and simply returned to serving another table with the same professionalism he had shown all afternoon. For the first time in years Roland felt something unfamiliar. Embarrassment. Not because someone had insulted him. Because someone had revealed the emptiness behind his wealth. The business lunch ended awkwardly. Several investors left without their usual excitement. One privately admitted that if Roland treated hard-working people with such disrespect, perhaps he would eventually treat business partners the same way. Within days rumors about the restaurant incident quietly circulated through the city's business community. No dramatic videos existed. No social media outrage exploded. Instead the story spread from person to person because those who witnessed genuine courage never forgot it. Meanwhile life continued for Colton. He packed Nora's lunches. Helped with homework. Worked overtime. Smiled at customers. Nothing about his routine changed because he had never confronted Roland hoping for fame. He had simply protected his self-respect. Several weeks later Nora's elementary school announced a family appreciation event where parents would speak about perseverance. Colton nervously accepted an invitation after his daughter proudly nominated him. That sunny afternoon dozens of families gathered outside beneath colorful decorations. Children laughed across the playground. Teachers welcomed guests. Parents shared stories about balancing work and family. As Colton finished describing how small acts of kindness helped people survive difficult seasons, unexpected applause interrupted him. Standing quietly near the back of the crowd was Roland. No expensive security team. No photographers. No audience waiting for headlines. Just one man carrying visible regret. He had spent weeks unable to forget the restaurant confrontation. He began noticing things he had ignored for years. Employees avoided eye contact. His own adult son rarely answered phone calls. Former friends only contacted him for business opportunities. His mansion echoed with silence each evening. Money had purchased everything except peace. After the event Roland approached Colton privately. His eyes looked tired. His confidence seemed different. For the first time perhaps in decades, he admitted he had been wrong. He confessed that growing up in poverty had filled him with fear of becoming powerless again. Success slowly transformed that fear into arrogance because putting others down made him temporarily feel stronger. Colton listened quietly. He understood pain. He simply refused to let pain become cruelty. Roland expected anger. Instead, Colton thanked him for telling the truth. Forgiveness did not erase what happened. But it offered both men an opportunity to move forward. Months passed. Roland introduced leadership programs throughout his companies focused on respect, humility, and employee well-being. He anonymously funded scholarships for single-parent families. Restaurant workers across the city noticed something surprising whenever he visited. He greeted them politely, learned their names, thanked them sincerely. People questioned whether someone could truly change. Those closest to him answered yes. Not because he became perfect. Because he kept choosing humility every day. One afternoon Colton received an unexpected envelope. Inside rested a handwritten letter. Roland explained that watching one father's quiet strength had transformed his understanding of success. Enclosed was a donation establishing a community education fund named after Colton's late wife, helping children from struggling single-parent homes receive tutoring, books, and music lessons. Colton sat silently holding the letter. Nora wrapped her arms around him. Neither spoke for several moments. Sometimes the greatest victories arrive without applause. Years later, children throughout Brookhaven benefited from opportunities they otherwise could never have afforded. Few knew the entire story behind the scholarship fund. Fewer still realized it began with one waiter refusing to surrender his dignity and one billionaire finally discovering that respect cannot be purchased. Colton continued working for several more years before eventually managing the restaurant. Customers loved him not because he served excellent meals, but because everyone who entered felt valued regardless of what they wore or how much money they possessed. Nora grew into a compassionate young woman who became a teacher, inspiring children with the same lessons her father had lived every day. She often reminded her students that courage does not require shouting louder than everyone else. Sometimes courage is simply refusing to let another person's cruelty define your worth. Roland never forgot that afternoon in the restaurant. Whenever he looked at the tiny scratch still visible on the expensive watch he wore that day, he remembered the moment a humble waiter shattered his pride without raising his voice. Before we finish this story, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed someone respond to humiliation with dignity instead of anger? Please leave a meaningful comment and share the lesson that stayed with you after hearing this story. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Remember, the strongest people are not always the richest, the loudest, or the most powerful. They are often the ones who carry invisible burdens, choose kindness over bitterness, stand for their dignity without losing their compassion, and prove that a humble heart can change even the hardest soul. Sometimes one moment of quiet courage becomes the beginning of someone else's redemption, and that is a legacy far greater than any fortune.